Hello, everyone. Good evening. Right, so welcome everyone to the final event of this two-day Reset conference. My name is Satu Teppo. I am the Acting Executive Director of the Don Dunstan Foundation, and we are presenting this conference in partnership with others, and we've been sort of member of the Reset project more broadly. I would firstly like to welcome Cliff Wilson to the stage to welcome us to country.
Thanks for the introduction, everyone. I'd just like to start off by saying Yanki Namina, Ngā Māni, Ngā Nare Cliffy Tunku Midlacha Wilson, Ngā Ngarrindjeri, Kana, Naranga, Ngadri, Arundamiyu, Mariwichanga, Ghana Miina, Ngā Wangari Mani Nabuni Kana Yatana, Ngā Yukandalia Yakandalia, Ngā Chalia. To translate what I just said, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Are you all good? That's good. That's good. My name is Cliffy Wilson. I'm the fifth born male of my family. My totem animal is the king brown snake. I'm a proud Ngarrindjeri, Kana, Naranga, Ngadri, and Arunda man. Yeah, there's a few there, I know. On behalf of my family, the Kana people, past and present, I would like to welcome you to Kana country tonight and have a good one. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cliff, for that. And I too would like to acknowledge that we meet today on the lands of the Kaurna people and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And just as a first step, I would like to note that it's been absolutely fascinating, especially today, about how many mentions my home country, Finland, has had in the conversation. It's by no means a paid advert, but it is obvious from the conversation that Finland is getting certain things right when it comes to cultural policy, and especially in that sort of direct support to artists, which has been sort of the main theme of the conversation today. So tonight's program for this little last segment that we have, we've got a video greeting in a moment from Senator Sarah Hanson-Young, an address from Brazil by Daniel Baron-Cohen, and then we have Jarrett Thomas giving as an in-person address as well. And then we've got the four panel members just for some final comments. I would like to just say a couple of words on behalf of the Don Dunstan Foundation. So we are a thought leadership organisation. We work a lot with on collaborative projects, exactly like this conference has been, and building on the legacy of the former Premier Don Dunstan, who has been watching over us over the 2 days of the conference. And I mentioned this to Patrick earlier, but one of the wonderful things about having been in this role at the Don Dunstan Foundation has really been about the stories and memories that people have of Dunstan and who've known him personally and worked with him. We had many references today to him from Mark Butler and Tony Burke talking about his legacy, and also referencing the importance of both the Dunstan government and Whitlam government's policies in the arts and how that thinking continues to be important to them. And it's, I think it is that, and I think it was Anna Goldsworthy who spoke of his sort of progressive ideas and his vision and leadership, and how that still continues to sort of give hope. He was a forward-looking visionary. He was a performer. He trained as an actor. He had this kind of quite rich cultural landscape, quoted poetry. He was an accomplished pianist, and all of that influenced and informed his politics, highlighting the importance of art to policy, to multiculturalism, quality of life, and importantly, in my opinion, the aspect of social equity and democratic opportunity. And there are obviously many of his achievements and legacies in terms of, setting up organisations. I think that's an important part of the fact that not only did he have this vision, progressive policies, but he was able to enact on them, partly through setting up organisations like Jam Factory, which really originally was based on, again, some of the ideas that we spoke about today in terms of fair pay, artists' work and so on, as well as other institutions. And I think in the sort of context of the whole conference, while we obviously as an organisation look back at Dunstan's legacy and the Dunstan decade, it's very important to look forward. And we're very proud to have co-presented this conference as it speaks to the future of arts and culture in Australia. And it speaks to the opportunity we have to reconsider the role of arts and culture on the public agenda and in our broader community. But moving on to the program of tonight, I will introduce Senator Sarah Hanson-Young, who's a South Australian senator representing the Australian Greens since 2007. A global citizen, Sarah is committed to ensuring Australia remains connected to the rest of the world through ideas and global action. Decency to refugees and promoting a welcoming Australia to new migrants are causes that are close to her heart. Sarah was named a World Economic Forum Young Global Leader in 2016 and will continue to stand up for the rights of vulnerable people in Australia and around the world. Her portfolios include arts, environment and biodiversity, water and Murray-Darling Basin, nuclear and communications. And we now have a short greeting from her that she was able to film when she was attending, or is attending, the COP26 meeting in Glasgow.
Well, hello, it's Sarah Hanson-Young here. I'm the Greens spokesperson federally for arts, but of course, a very proud South Australian. And I'm sorry I can't be in Adelaide with you today for this arts event, because in fact I'm in Glasgow at the COP26. And as you can see, it's crazy. People are walking up and down here, hustling along. Everyone's working really hard to try and get an agreement for climate action. And there's some amazing pieces of art in this display as well. People using art to send a very strong message for the need for taking action on climate change, for ensuring that we can send those messages to political leaders. We can tell a story about what needs to happen. This is the power of art. It brings community together. We know that during COVID-19, this has been a fundamental issue of the impact on the South Australian arts industry and artists right across the country, in fact, right across the world. We know that our artists and our arts organisations and institutions have been the hardest hit. We've been working hard in the federal parliament for support. We've been working hard to ensure that artists get access to JobKeeper and to arts grants programs. I want to see an insurance scheme in place, particularly for life insurance. But overall, more importantly than all of this, is we need to build a better culture politically that supports art, the value of art, why it's important. And whether it's dealing with the pandemic or in the craziness of the very confronting and often overwhelming nature of the climate crisis, it's artists who can help us to communicate and to paint a new story and a new vision. It's so important. I'm a big believer in social change. The way we get social change done is by telling stories. We help change people's minds and hearts when they are able to communicate, and when we're able to communicate properly and we're able to help them connect the issues and the challenges that we're facing with what is going on in their lives, the things that they value. So I'm sorry I can't be with you. It's really important South Australian Summit, but right here from Glasgow, we're all doing our bit, and I look forward to speaking to you when I get back to Adelaide in a few weeks.
And can I now welcome Justin O'Connor to the stage to introduce the next video.
Thanks. Thanks, Satu. Very quickly, we wanted to have some overseas input, not just from Glasgow, and unlike the ABC, we overseas doesn't just mean the US or the UK. And we reached out to it's a colleague of mine who's been working in Brazil for 30 years now, and he's been working with the Pataxó people of the northeast of Brazil. And we asked him to make this video. It's based in an area of Brazil. It's one of the areas that was first colonized by Portugal. And this particular area, which he calls Easter Mountain, was discovered, was colonized very early in 1500, so very early on. And 500 years later, the Pataxó people reclaimed that mountain, and illegally, and there was lots of violence, but they reclaimed that mountain, and Dan Barrancoin worked with them to build a monument to that. And 20 years later, he went back to redo that monument and found that the language had been rediscovered, if you like, recovered, and a whole new generation of young activists, cultural activists, very much trying to pull the culture back from the edge of genocide, really, the edge of disappearance. So that's what we wanted to get him to speak about. It's the first time a video camera has been in that area. He took it in. We paid for him to go in there and do that, and working really with the community. And this is the first step for them to begin to use those kind of techniques to start talking about themselves in their own voices. So that's what we'll hear today. Just as a little bit of technical background, if you like, at this moment, Bolsonaro, who needs no introduction, has been trying to revoke indigenous land rights, and it's called Bill 490. So you'll hear from some indigenous activists who are talking about their attempts to block that bill, which will strip indigenous land rights from there. So that's what that means. And I think that also that obviously Bolsonaro is in power now, but the previous government, the Workers' Party, also gave a green light to the industrialization of the Amazon. And it's only now that kind of indigenous rights has been accepted as within or beginning to be accepted within the Workers' Party itself. And just finally, at this quite extreme situation, and it is very extreme, and many of the people involved in that early land rights movement were assassinated, and they're still continually assassinated. But they turn to culture not as an afterthought, not as something you do, when you, at the end of the day, when you slump back in the couch. It's essential to their survival, and the recovery of those traditions that we'll see in this short movie is really important for that. So with that, I'll hand over to Mr. Video.
We struggle and cry out for the Amazon, struggle and cry out for the Amazon, we struggle and cry out for the Amazon, we struggle and cry out. Listen to the cry of the forest, listen to the cry of the forest. Her sons and daughters clamor for justice.
Here, alongside Tocantins River, in the city of Marabá, 10 years after the murder of Maria and her husband, Zé Cláudio. Viva Maria, viva. I was there, strong and serene, in the same place. For years, I served you with my beauty and fruit. And suddenly, I no longer exist. You approached not to harvest or to embrace me, but to begin your ritual. I cried with pain, but you silenced me, bit by bit, devastating me, until I fell to the ground. But I still have roots. I will shoot up, yes, between the teeth of your chainsaw.
This poem was written by Claudenir Ribeiro, which is Claudenice's sister, sisters of José Cláudio, a group of extractivist artisan women here from the region who carry on with this important struggle, inspiring us so that we can resist
O marco temporal dizer que a gente não é indígena, só porque a gente usa roupa, só porque a gente também usa celular, a gente não parou no tempo, não. Do jeito que o homem branco evoluiu, a gente também evoluímos. Eu quero a minha casa, eu não quero sair do meu território. Meu povo não vai sair do território porque lá é nosso, por direito, está na Constituição. O meio ambiente somos nós. A cura da cidade nos adoece, a comida da cidade nos adoece, mas lá não, a gente tem um remédio, nós temos raiz e dizer que nós temos sim uma economia. Esse aqui, ó, é de Tucumã, esse aqui, ó, de osso dos animais, mas a gente sim, a gente cria, a gente vende copaíba, a gente vende andiraba, cumaru, mas é um dinheiro que vem da floresta, é um dinheiro que não é do ouro, é um dinheiro que dá destruição, não, é da natureza, é da floresta, e plantadas mandioca, batata, cana, mas está lá. Mas nós nunca destruímos, nunca botamos uma máquina para destruir hectares de terra. E dizer para o Senado, vote, vote, pensa no meio ambiente, pensa.
Eu sou Lícuri Pataxó, eu sou um artesão e trabalho com reciclagem de pedaços de tronco. Isso é uma forma de a gente preservar a natureza, porque o artesanato também ele sempre foi uma grande subsistência para os índios, um elemento de troca, um elemento de sabedoria, um elemento de riqueza, um elemento de ajuda. Aí, com 19 anos eu estava aqui construindo o Monumento de Resistência dos Povos Indígenas do Brasil, onde tem aqui os nomes dos nossos parentes, os nomes dos nossos antepassados em memória aos povos extintos, para poder garantir a nossa cultura, o nosso direito, a nossa sabedoria. Esse Pé de Pau Brasil ele tem 22 anos e hoje ele ameaça derrubar o nosso monumento. E agora uma grande pergunta que eu faço: nós corta ele ou deixa ele viver?
Jaha hotu pataxó, me anite no moison, jaha yon han, patichá, jaha tupi pariponá, caçacá, a Iena pinato achohan pataxó, anite no manhã já o teu utexó na pinato paquiri pataxó, caçaca, até o teu na achohan, o teu pescui, arroeio, angurá, han pu hacha, yamã.
Olá para todos, meu nome é Yamani Pataxó, trabalho com ecoturismo, esse é minha farda de trabalho. Temos a tanga, o pitai, que é feito com o barbante, o açaí e o cricó. Aqui temos o cocá, a trança, a pena de pato, a pena de arara e um brinco que nós colocamos para enfeitar. Aqui é outro brinco, aqui é meu cordão e meu tupiçai.
Daqui a pouco eu te respondo. Bom dia, me chamo Ikiram Pataxó, sou professora, vejo que a escola em si, ela tem um papel importante, mas vejo também que outros espaços servem de aprendizado. Aqui onde eu estou é um espaço de formação, acredito eu, assim para mim e para meus alunos. A comunidade ela tem um conjunto de plantas medicinais, temos plantas frutíferas, e eu vejo que esses espaços que traz aprendizado para a gente, traz um pouco da nossa ancestralidade, trabalhar com a terra, trabalhar com a planta, conhecer cada planta que a gente tem na nossa comunidade, no nosso território, conhecer as árvores, né, que têm uma importância para cada um de nós. Esse preto que está destacado aqui, que para a gente ela vem da fruta do genipapo, né, e o vermelho é do urucum. Essas informações de plantas, né, que também traz essa força para a gente. Ela, ao mesmo tempo que ela embeleza ao rosto, ao corpo, ela também traz essa força de ancestralidade, de luta mesmo. O genipapo, a fruta dele, a gente pode tirar o caldo, né, dele, tomar como suco ou fazer o chá para quem tem problema de anemia. Esse ensinamento ele vem já desde casa, desde o convívio com sua família, né? Que desde quando a gente passa a ser mãe, né? No meu caso mesmo, quando eu passei a ser mãe, eu já tinha vários conhecimentos em relação às plantas medicinais. E hoje os meus filhos já conhecem um pouco desse ensinamento, porque quando eu vou fazer algum medicamento, algum chá, né, um xarope de folhas medicinais, eles estão acompanhando. Então, é um ensinamento que vai passando ali dentro da própria casa, né, dentro de casa ali, da avó, da mãe. E aí são ensinamentos que devem ser levados também para a escola, né, porque nós temos conhecimentos internos, nós temos conhecimentos tradicionais que nos foram ensinados, que a gente também deve estar repassando. O monumento em si é um espaço que traz essa formação para a gente, né? É um espaço onde a gente está conectado com a natureza e representa a nossa resistência, que hoje está ali fortalecido, né, novamente. Então, é um espaço de buscar a força, de buscar uma energia positiva, de buscar a positividade, né, principalmente para os momentos atuais no qual a gente está vivendo. A questão da PL 490, a questão do marco temporal. esses movimentos, né, que acontecem na BR. Acredito que para os jovens, né, não foi só um momento ali de estar cantando, de estar dançando, foi um momento também de fortalecimento, foi um momento no qual eles mesmos tiveram conhecimentos a fundo, né, do que eles pensavam, de que todo movimento ele está engajado com a cultura, ele está engajado com a luta mesmo, e com a força mesmo da ancestralidade.
Aqui é um lugar maravilhoso, lindo. Aqui você vai aprender um pouco de tudo, da medicina, da ancestralidade. Mas para vocês saber mesmo, eu convido vocês para conhecer a Universidade Pataxó do Monte Pascoal.
Listen to the cry of the forest. Listen to the cry of the forest. Her sons and daughters clamor for justice. Her sons and daughters clamor for justice. Stop the genocide. Stop the ecocide. Stop the genocide. Stop the pandemic.
Pisa, 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 pisa devagar, ou pisa devagarinho na folha do Jurema. Pisa, 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 pisa devagar, ou pisa devagarinho na folha do Jurema. Pisa, 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 você torna a repisar, ou pisa devagarinho na folha do Jurema. Pisa, pisa, pisa.
So thank you, Justin, for facilitating that with Dan, and thank you to Dan Baron-Cohen for facilitating the creation of the video for all of us to see, and that important message. We now have an in-person address, the final address of the conference. We have Jarrett Thomas coming on stage shortly. Jarrett Thomas is a Nukunu person of the Southern Flinders Ranges, a writer, curator, teacher, and currently research fellow, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Material, Culture and Art, South Australian Museum and University of South Australia. He is an international award-winning author with his works of theatre and fiction exploring issues of Aboriginal marginalisation and resistance, the environment, gender and sexuality. Jared is a Churchill Fellow, a proud ambassador of the Indigenous Literacy Foundation and a member of the Nukunu Wapma Dura Aboriginal Corporation. Jared.
Thank you so much, Cliff, for your very generous welcome to country. I'd also like to acknowledge that we're here gathered on Kaurna Yata, the land of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains. In acknowledging that we're here on Kaurna country, I recognise the privilege of learning from Kaurna people and living and working on their lands. I also recognise their great dispossession, the ongoing colonisation that they endure, and I support them to once again fully enjoy their inalienable rights, their sovereignty. So nice to be with you tonight. So many friends, family, allies in the room. Probably not the people that I need to be speaking to. So hopefully my message reaches those that do need to hear it. My father's family are Nukunu and Ngadjuri people of the Southern Flinders Ranges and mid-north of South Australia. My mother's Aboriginal family are Kowa from the Diamantina region in Queensland. It became apparent to me as a child growing up in Port Augusta that there is a great discrepancy when it comes to social justice relating to my people. My people's exclusion from Australian society was palpable. There were no Aboriginal people employed as teachers. There were no Aboriginal people working in the supermarket, the clothes shops, the police force, etc. Amongst my family were some of the most materially poor people that I've known, but the richest in spirit and generosity. My activism was initially ignited by playing in a band as a 13-year-old with older friends at my school. We performed songs by Coloured Stone and No Fix Address, which prompted me to speak with my parents and grandparents about their experiences, which consequently prompted me to challenge inequities between my people and mainstream Australia. As a 16-year-old, a play called Funerals and Circuses, written by the Aranda playwright Roger Bennett, revealed to me the power of art as a tool of activism. I saw the play went on an excursion in 1992 to experience the Adelaide Festival. I was one of two year 12 Aboriginal students remaining in Port Augusta. We stood out the front of Theatre 62, not knowing what we were about to see. Two Aboriginal men were standing in the line amongst people waiting to enter the theatre. A bouncer approached the men and said, "Fellas, the pub is around the corner." The other Aboriginal Year 12 student in the group and I looked at each other thinking, what in the hell? Here we go again. The men said, "We're here to see the play." The bouncer responded, raising his voice, "Stop messing around, fellas. The pub is around the corner." "Come on, mate. We're dressed well, wearing jackets, collared shirts, nice shoes, slacks. There's no problem here. We just want to see the show," one of the Aboriginal men replied. "If you don't stop messing around, I'm going to have to call the cops," the bouncer threatened. Pulling a ticket from his pocket, one of the Aboriginal men retorted, "Here's my fucking ticket, mate. Leave us alone." "That's it. I warned you. You can't use that language around here," the bouncer bit back, and a few minutes later, police officers escorted the men away. I sat in the theatre feeling ashamed, demoralised, as my teachers and peers spoke between themselves, supportive of the actions of the bouncer and the police officers. And then Paul Kelly opened the show with a song. And then the two Aboriginal men that were escorted away by the police stepped onto the stage beneath the spotlight. They were actors Robert Wardy and Michael Harris. And they said something to the audience like, "Welcome to our town. We're going to show you around tonight. What you just saw outside is typical of what happens here. You just saw blatant prejudice, discrimination, racism." And what we want to know is, why didn't you do anything? The play was my first experience of seeing Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people working together to address racism through the arts. And my dear friend, Simone Ter, thank you for that gift. It was the most powerful thing I'd ever seen, and I decided then and there that I wanted to be a playwright. My first play, Flash Red Ford, articulating the injustices faced by my family in the 1920s in Port Augusta, was performed 6 years later in 1999 in Kenya, Uganda. I then transitioned to writing fiction for young adults and children. I first set off writing to address racism with a sense of urgency, because even as a 16-year-old, the poverty faced by my people, the overrepresentation in the criminal justice system, high unemployment rates, our exclusion from Australian society was glaring, and it still is. I probably only realised more recently that my need to address racism through writing is in order to say these three things. This country has cared for us, and we have cared for this country for at least 60,000 years. 2, we look after this country best. 3, give us the opportunity to look after our country for our sake and for yours. When it comes to Aboriginal visual arts, music, theatre, literature and dance, if you listen carefully, we are saying these three things. 1, this country has cared for us, and we have cared for this country for at least 60,000 years. 2, we look after this country best. 3, give us the opportunity to look after our country for our sake and for yours. In relation to country, many, and rightly so, are waking up to the great urgency of addressing climate change. But for my people, we've been in the midst of an apocalypse since the earliest stages of colonisation. In the 1840s, when colonisation on my people's Nukuna lands commenced, the plain surrounding Melrose resembled an English parkland, with the gums 4 metres in diameter, their trunks reaching 40 metres into the sky before a canopy formed. And beneath these canopies, native grasses flourished. The creeks ran and the waterholes were full, not just during the wet, but all year round. The creeks were wetlands. It's no coincidence that the colonists named a place near the southern border of Nukuna country, Crystal Brook. The creek beds that are now lined with possibly the last generation of river red gums are now deprived of their water by industry tapping into the aquifer for the sake of wheat, sheep, cattle, and minerals. The conservation status of the river red gums is now listed as critically endangered ecosystems. The fishing along sections of the Nukuna coastline is now banned due to lead, zinc, and cadmium from the Port Pirie lead smelter depositing since its founding in the 1880s. These deposits are now deemed as being beyond acceptable standards in the ocean floor sediment. And as for the country of my Ngadjuri ancestors, Ngadjuri means forest people. But the most of Ngadjuri country is now monoculture, vineyards, sheep, and wheat. There's no forest to be found. Think about this the next time you drive from Gawler to Clare. If there were a report card of the state of health of the South Australian environment, with 10 being indicative of the health of the country just before colonisation in the 1830s, South Australia would now be lucky to receive a 2 out of 10. The country is on life support. Things are beyond urgent. However, there is hope, as the evidence is overwhelming that when Aboriginal people have the opportunity to look after our country, its health rapidly improves. When Aboriginal people work in arts organisations, we bring our culture, our family, our knowledge of country, and not only does this enrich service delivery, we are sharing knowledge of how to create a just future based on our just past. And it's very wrong to service the maintenance and development of the colonising culture when Aboriginal people aren't resourced equitably to maintain and develop our own, a culture which is the oldest continuous living culture on the planet. So whilst I've made the most of opportunities to carve out a career in the arts, and yes, great things have and continue to happen in the arts, and many of you in this room tonight have provided support. A major disappointment of my 25 plus years working in the sector is witnessing a lack of Aboriginal people employed in the sector. And not just employed in relegated Aboriginal roles, but in leadership positions across the whole of the sector. There are now over 100 Aboriginal medical doctors in this country, lawyers, silks, judges. But in terms of the employment of Aboriginal people in the arts, not as performers or exhibitors, but leaders within organisations, it seems we've regressed. I do not have the power individually to address this situation, to make the changes with the urgency required. But some of you amongst us do, and collectively we all do. And what this change relies upon is a relinquishment of power, a fair distribution of resources, opportunities and privileges. After all, this is what social justice means. Yes, as Aboriginal people, we're 3% of the population, but our 3% Aboriginal employment targets a fair distribution of opportunity, of privilege, given the urgency of our situation. Is this what working towards a just future depends upon, or is more required? I hope that another Aboriginal person isn't expressing the same sentiments that I am now in a setting like this in the next 5 or so years. I hope that we don't have to be like the actors Robert Waldie and Michael Harris in the plays Funerals and Circuses, pointing at people in the audience and asking, why didn't you do anything? But yeah, hopefully we're going to do something, right? Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jared, for that address. That will certainly stay with me and probably many of us for some time. Thank you. Could I now just invite the 4 panel facilitators to the stage? So Tali Barnett, Justin O'Connor, Jessica Alice and Emma Webb. They will just give some final closing remarks to close the conference.
This will be very quick. We promise you. We're on the final leg. I'm on my final leg. So yeah, we're going to just say a little bit about the future, different things, but also respond in 1 or 2 lines about what we've heard in the conference. And there's been so much. And I'd just like to say, I mean, what struck me most is the presence of the First Nations, the contribution of the Aboriginal, different Aboriginal voices we've heard both live and on the screen. I think it's certainly changed our ideas of, it's really brought home the idea that not just you know, we just heard from Jared, a very beautiful story about the caring for country, and let us do that. But also, you know, how we care about our own culture, how we've kind of destroyed the ecosystem, or are on the edge of destroying the ecosystem of Australia. But we've heard throughout these last 2 days how we've destroyed our own cultural ecosystem, which is on its last legs. And I think some of the things that Jacob Baum said about what does it really mean if we take culture seriously? What does it mean for the way we do business and conduct our everyday life? I thought that, for me, that was really struck home, something we've really got to think through. And just very quickly to say that we are planning a series of events for next year. We've not worked that out yet, but we really do think that we want to take this forward in a much more action-orientated way. So, okay.
Thank you. A couple of things. One is that you will next week receive some kind of evaluation that we promise is not the usual kind of survey monkey, answer these questions here to determine the value of this experience, because as we have heard over and again, and I have said, all evidence is political and all value has to come from a meaningful engagement with ideas and concepts rather than from meaningless forms of evaluation that are constantly required upon the arts and cultural sector. So let's start where we are and make all evaluation meaningful. For this process, that evaluation will also be about how can you, what did you hear that stuck with you? You will have an opportunity to answer what was meaningful for you about this experience, these 2 days, and what ways might you want to contribute to the next steps for arts and culture to create that future for a public value that is grounded in meaningfulness and not in mindless economic metrics. One thing that's been valuable for me across this year of Reset events and across this 2 days of conversations is something that happened to me on the very first day of the very first Reset meeting, where we met at Flinders Victoria Square and we sat around a room with representatives from the arts sector and from the 3 universities. And I said something about how all 3 universities are here. And I saw a change in some of the faces of the art sector people who were there in the room. It was meaningful to those people that it wasn't one university trying to gain impact with the art sector through poor relationship building. And so for me, it's meaningful to have the 3 banners side by side here on the stage as not in a competitive process, as not being not able to talk to each other, even though we are all academics that work in the same city, but as creating a foundation for new conceptual architecture together with the arts and cultural sector. That's important.
I really want to thank Jared for that incredible speech as well, and yeah, painting that a picture of that incredible show, which I think is yeah, something that maybe we should be talking about remounting in a new version. Simone, I know I've had that conversation with a few people actually. We need to pitch that to the Adelaide Festival. I think it's coming up to its anniversary as well, so 30 years. Yeah, right. Well, let's do that. Absolutely up for that. I think that, you know, we, as I said earlier on the final panel, like there's a series of other different types of actions that people can get involved in, but also please just make your own action as well. Like, I think that's really, really important. But yeah, AICSA and also the Reset collaboration will stay in touch with everyone. We're looking at developing a bit of a sort of a manifesto, or like pulling together some of the key ideas and actions that came out of this conference and putting them into a sort of a manifesto style document and call to action. And we will include you all in that through the Arts Front platform and in other ways. And yeah, just also really want to thank Arts Front for their fair work on the conference as well. But that will continue in that conversation, as well as, you know, other types of events during the year. And then, you know, the Arts Industry Council and all of you and all of our colleagues will obviously be working towards trying to push for conversation and policy towards the next federal election. And then also, I guess, you know, looking beyond that, you know, whoever forms government, there's going to be a need for continued activism and action. Yeah, I think the thing that I've got out of the last few days is that, like, there's such an appetite for a different type of conversation that's maybe a little bit, you know, that's kind of courageous and progressive, and that might extend what we think is possible through arts and cultural activism and policy. So it's been really heartwarming and fantastic to see the response and everyone's participation in the conference.
I think that's so true, Emma. And for me, I think the biggest shift that I've felt and seen yesterday and today is the fact that through everything that we've done and shared together, I don't think that there is anyone who has been at Reset who would now think that GDP or GVA is the best way to articulate the value of arts and culture. I think we have made a broad, meaningful shift to understanding that public value is what we need to be speaking about. And I think we all understand that thoroughly. And I think that gathering together like this shows how we can make that broad change together by coming together and having these conversations, having some challenging and risk-taking conversations. We can make these things move faster. And that for me is a great example of why we need to do this more often, and we will continue to do so. It's also a reason why I would encourage you all to join and remain active with the Arts Industry Council of South Australia. It is through collective action that we will make all of the changes possible. So thank you for joining us, and I'm looking forward to everything that we will continue to do together.
Thank you, everyone. I'll just do the final thanks. Don't worry, I'll be very, very brief. First of all, the 3 universities. Thank you to University of Adelaide, Flinders University and University of South Australia, the Arts Industry Council of South Australia, the Don Dunstan Foundation. Thank you to Arts South Australia, Feral Arts and Arts Front. Thank you to all the volunteers who have helped on the registration desks. Your support has been invaluable. All other partners. Huge thanks to Edwin, who's been running the show behind the scenes. There is the website where all the information about the conference will be is resetartsandculture.com. Subscribe to the mailing list if you haven't done so yet. We'll be providing more information about the future through that. And leave your badges behind if you don't want to keep them as souvenirs, and we'll recycle them. Thank you for everyone for attending online and in person. Have a good night. Thank you.